Welcome to a deep dive. Today, we're getting into something really central if you're in the UK, especially if retirement is on your mind, or even already here. We're talking about the UK state pension triple lock.
Ah, yes, the triple lock. It's definitely a term you hear bandied about a lot, isn't it? Often stirs up quite a bit of debate too. And it has a massive impact on millions of people's finances. Seems simple, but layers, lots of layers.
Definitely. And to help us navigate this, we've been looking at a really helpful resource. It's an article aimed squarely at pensioners in the UK, trying to demystify this whole thing. It's from Plouta.
Plouta.
Yeah, they describe themselves as a financial wellness community. Their whole thing is, clear, practical advice, budgeting, investing, pensions, tax stuff.
Right, cutting through the jargon, making finance less intimidating.
Exactly. Helping people make smarter money decisions, basically, whatever stage of life they're at. So, using the insights from that Plouta piece, what we want to do today is properly unpack the triple lock. What is it? Why do we even have it? How does it actually work each year?
And the impact it's had, the pros and cons everyone argues about.
And crucially, what it all means for you planning your own retirement.
Yeah, getting beyond just the headlines. What's the reality?
Okay, let's dive in then. First things first. What exactly is the state pension triple lock?
Okay, so fundamentally it's a government commitment. Each year, the state pension goes up, and the amount it goes up by is decided by looking at three specific metrics. It increases by whichever of those three figures is the highest.
And that increase kicks in from the following April.
Right, that's the one, applied from April.
So what are the three things, the triple part of the lock?
Okay, number one, the average increase in earnings across the UK.
Right. And the Plouta article mentioned this is usually measured using wage growth data from May to July of the year before.
Correct, that specific period. Second is inflation. They use the Consumer Price Index, CPI, for this.
So how fast prices are rising for everyday things.
Exactly. And the figure they normally use is the CPI rate from September of the previous year.
Okay. Earnings growth, inflation. And the third one.
It's just a baseline guarantee, 2.5%.
Ah, okay. So it'll always go up by at least 2.5%, even if earnings and inflation are lower.
Precisely. So every year, check average wage growth, check September's CPI inflation, check the 2.5% minimum, whichever number is biggest. That's the percentage increase the state pension gets from next April.
And just to be clear, this applies across the board, both the old basic state pension and the new one.
Yes, absolutely. It covers both the pre-2016 basic state pension and the new state pension system introduced after that. It's the universal uprating mechanism.
Interesting. So why did they bring this in? What was happening before the triple lock?
Well, before this came along, the state pension increase was mainly just linked to price inflation. That had been the case since the early 1980s.
Just prices, so not earnings.
Not consistently, no. And the problem, or the perceived problem, was that often average wages were rising faster than prices, which meant, over time, the state pension wasn't really keeping pace with the standard of living of people in work. Its value was sort of eroding relative to earnings.
Ah, I see. So pensioners were potentially falling behind the rest of society.
That was the concern. Worries about pensioner poverty creeping up, and the state pension becoming a smaller and smaller part of someone's retirement income picture.
So the triple lock was meant to fix that.
Pretty much. The stated aims were, well, first, to help restore the state pension's value relative to earnings, stop that gap widening, and second, to provide, more generous and reliable increases each year, give pensioners more security against rising costs.
And I suppose also ensure that when the economy was doing well and wages were going up, pensioners shared in that prosperity too.
Exactly that. It wasn't just about protecting against inflation, but also linking it to national wage growth.
And it was the coalition government that introduced it, kicking in around 2011-12.
Yes, introduced by the coalition and effectively applied from the 2011-12 financial year onwards.
Okay, so that's the one and the why, but the Plouta article also really dug into how it works year on year. This is where it gets quite interesting, this highest of the three thing.
It really is, because it's not just about a single year's increase, it's the cumulative effect over time that matters.
Right, they had a good example. Let's say 1 year, average earnings rise by 4.1%.
Okay.
And inflation, the CPI, is lower, maybe 1.7%.
Right.
And the minimum guarantee is always 2.5%. So you compare 4.1%, 1.7%, and 2.5%.
And the highest is clearly 4.1%.
So the pension goes up by 4.1% that year.
Makes sense. But what if things are different?
Okay, another scenario. Maybe earnings growth is sluggish, say 1.5%.
Hmm.
Inflation is also low, maybe just 1.0%.
Okay.
But the minimum is still 2.5%. So now you compare 1.5%, 1.0%, and 2.5%.
And this time, 2.5%, it's the highest.
So the pension still goes up by 2.5%, even though earnings and inflation were much lower.
Ah, I see. It always locks in the best outcome of those three specific measures for that year.
Exactly.
And that's what creates this ratchet effect people talk about, isn't it?
That's the term, yeah. Explain that a bit more.
Well, a ratchet only moves one way, right? It clicks forward but doesn't slip back. The triple lock works a bit like that for the pension's value relative to just prices or just earnings. Because it always picks the highest, over time, the pension tends to get pushed upwards faster than if it were only linked to one thing, like just inflation. It locks in the gains from whichever factor was highest each year.
So it's designed to potentially outpace inflation, and sometimes even earnings, over the long term.
That's the inherent mechanism, yes, depending on how those three figures fluctuate year to year.
And the impact of this, according to the Plouta analysis, has been pretty substantial.
Oh, definitely. They highlight that it has genuinely increased the real terms value, the actual purchasing power of the state pension since it came in.
It's consistently delivered increases higher than just inflation alone would have, or just earnings alone.
Generally, yes. If you averaged it out, the triple lock increases have tended to be more generous than either of the single link alternatives would have been over that period.
And that's had a tangible effect on people's lives. The article mentioned poverty reduction.
It did. It's credited with helping lift a significant number of older people out of poverty. By making the state pension a more substantial foundation, it's become a more reliable income source for many retirees.
They give an example figure, too, for the 2025 uprating.
Yes, for the April 2025 increase. That year, the highest factor was earnings growth at 4.1%. And based on that, the full new state pension went up to roughly 230.25 a week.
230.25, which is what, nearly 12,000 pounds a year?
Just under, around 11,973 per year.
And the older basic state pension.
That went up to about 176 pounds 45 a week, which works out at roughly 9,175 annually.
Okay. And the article is careful to say these are specific 2025-26 figures, right? They change each April.
Absolutely. Crucial point. Those are just illustrative for that one year. You always need to check the current official rates on the gov.uk website for the latest figures, but they give you a sense of the scale and how that percentage increase translates into actual money.
Right. So it sounds like it's been pretty positive for pensioners' incomes then.
Yeah.
Which makes you wonder, why is it always being debated? Why is it so controversial sometimes?
Well, that's the flip side. Despite those clear benefits for pensioners, there are some really significant question marks, mainly around the long-term cost and affordability.
Okay, let's break that down. Arguments for keeping it first. What are the main points?
Well, the biggest one is simply that it works. It achieves its main goal: protecting pensioners' living standards, making sure their income keeps up with either rising costs or rising wages in the wider economy.
So this stops them falling behind.
Exactly. And directly linked to that, as we said, it's seen as a key factor in reducing pensioner poverty.
Okay, what else?
There's a fairness argument, too. People pay national insurance all their working lives. The argument goes they deserve a decent, reliable income in retirement. The triple lock provides that predictability.
Certainty is variable.
Very. And the mechanism itself, highest of three, is relatively easy to grasp, even if the background calculations are complex. That simplicity is a plus.
Anything else in the pro column?
Well, sometimes proponents point to international comparisons. Historically, the UK state pension hasn't been that generous compared to many other developed nations when you look at it as a percentage of average earnings. The argument is the triple lock is helping the UK catch up, albeit gradually.
Okay, so protects living standards, reduces poverty, fairness, simplicity, catching up internationally. Those seem like strong points. What about the arguments against it? What are the big concerns?
The number one issue, the one you hear constantly, is the cost to the taxpayer.
Because it always takes the highest number.
Precisely. That ratchet effect means state pension spending tends to rise faster, sometimes significantly faster, than if it were just linked to earnings or just inflation.
And with an aging population, more pensioners.
Exactly. That cost is projected to become a much bigger burden on public finances in the coming decades.
Which leads to the next big criticism, intergenerational fairness.
Yes. Is it fair, critics ask, for today's younger workers to pay increasing amounts through their taxes and national insurance to fund pension increases that might be growing faster than their own wages, especially if other state benefits aren't rising as quickly?
Hmm, I can see the tension there.
Then there's that economic ratchet effect again, viewed negatively this time. The pension can get a big boost even if the overall economy is sluggish, or if wage growth is weak for many workers. It can feel disconnected from the broader economic reality.
And economists often weigh in on this, don't they?
Regularly, you get warnings from various think tanks and economists about the long-term fiscal sustainability, suggesting that, unchanged, it could become unaffordable down the line, putting pressure on other public services or requiring much higher taxes.
The article also mentioned that temporary suspension, the volatility issue.
Yes, for the April 2022 increase. That was unusual. Post-pandemic, earnings data was skewed really high because of statistical anomalies, people coming off furlough mainly. If they had applied the triple lock using that distorted earnings figure, the pension increase would have been enormous, like over 8%.
So the government stepped in.
They did. They temporarily suspended the earnings element for that 1 year and used inflation instead, which was lower but still substantial. It highlighted how volatile economic shocks can make the triple lock formula produce unexpected, potentially problematic results.
So it's this constant balancing act, isn't it? Protecting pensioners versus managing the national budget and fairness between generations.
That's the core tension, yes.
Okay, so where did the Plouta article leave things in terms of the current status and future outlook? This was reflecting mid-2025.
Well, as we discussed, it confirmed the triple lock was applied for the April 2025, uprating that 4.1% rise based on earnings. So it was active then.
And looking ahead, politically.
The article noted the UK general election was due by January 2025, and historically, leading up to elections, the main political parties tend to pledge their commitment to keeping the triple lock.
Because it's popular with older voters.
It's certainly a significant factor in many voters' minds, yes. So pre-election promises to maintain it are common.
But the outcome of that election is key.
Absolutely crucial. The stance of whoever forms the government determines what actually happens next. Despite manifesto pledges, the ongoing cost pressures mean its long-term future is never completely guaranteed. It's always subject to review behind the scenes.
And there are sometimes alternative ideas floated, right? Things like a double lock.
Exactly. Removing the 2.5% floor and just using the highest of earnings or inflation is one idea sometimes mentioned, or smoothing increases over several years. Various mechanisms are debated, usually aiming for more predictability or lower long-term costs, while still trying to offer protection.
So the message for people listening is, keep an eye on policy developments.
Definitely. The Plouta piece really stressed this. Government policy isn't static. Things can change. Staying informed about these discussions is really important for your own financial planning.
Which perfectly leads us to the bottom line. What does all this, the triple lock, the debates, the uncertainty, actually mean for your retirement planning?
Right. This is where Plouta's advice really hits home. The core takeaway from their article is this. The triple lock has been beneficial. It has made the state pension more valuable. But you absolutely must see the state pension as the foundation of your retirement income, not the whole building.
Especially given that debate about long-term sustainability we just discussed.
Precisely. You simply cannot bank on the triple lock remaining exactly as it is for the next, say, 20 or 30 years you might be retired. Policy could change.
So relying solely on the state pension is risky.
It's very unlikely to provide the kind of comfortable retirement lifestyle most people hope for. Even with the triple lock boosts we've seen, it's still a foundation, not the full picture. That's why building your own savings is so vital. Workplace pensions, personal pensions, ISAs, other investments, these are the things you control.
They supplement that state foundation.
They're essential to supplement it. Your personal savings are what will likely make the difference between just getting by and living comfortably.
And it also means needing some flexibility in your plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because of that potential policy uncertainty around the triple lock, your retirement strategy needs to be robust. It should be able to cope if future state pension increases aren't quite as generous as they have been in the past decade or so.
Don't assume the best case scenario forever.
Exactly. Plan for different possibilities.
And one very practical tip from the source.
Check your state pension forecast regularly. Go online, use the government's tool. Knowing what you're projected to get and when you'll get it is absolutely fundamental. You can't plan without knowing your starting point.
So wrapping this up, what's the big picture from the Plouta analysis?
I think it's twofold. First, acknowledge that the triple lock has been genuinely valuable for UK pensioners. It's boosted incomes, protected against cost rises, helped reduce poverty. That's undeniable.
Point two.
But it faces real significant challenges regarding its long-term cost and affordability, especially with demographic shifts and economic pressures. That debate isn't going away.
And the key message for everyone listening, the empowering bit.
Is that the state pension, important as it is just one part of the puzzle. The most reliable route to the retirement you want is through your own saving and investing efforts. That's what gives you control and security.
Understanding policies like the triple lock helps you plan better.
Absolutely. Knowing how it works, its strengths, its weaknesses, the debates around it, it makes you a more informed planner for your own life and maybe a more informed citizen, too, when these national conversations happen.
It leaves us with quite a profound question, doesn't it? Thinking about those economic challenges and the aging population. How do we strike that balance? Supporting current pensioners fairly, many of whom depend heavily on the state pension, while also ensuring the whole system is sustainable and fair for younger and future generations.
It's a really tough balancing act. There are no easy answers, and it's something policymakers and indeed all of us will be wrestling with for years to come.